The Great War had ended in a cacophony of fire and steel, leaving Earth a scarred planet barely clinging to life. Cities lay shattered, their once proud skylines reduced to jagged ruins. The alien forces of the Thetros coalition had been driven away, but not before their final assault scorched the surface of humanity's cradle. Earth stood alone, surrounded by the wreckage of its own defenders and the smoldering carcasses of its enemies' war machines. Amidst this devastation, whispers began to circulate of a ship, an eerie, spectral vessel seen drifting through the wreckage. It was called the Phantom of Terra, named after the last Terranian flagship, the Arclight. The Arclight had been Earth's final hope, destroyed in a last-ditch effort to repel the alien invaders. But something happened in its final moments. Something unnatural. The ship's remains were infused with a strange, otherworldly energy, a blend of cosmic forces and the dying breath of its crew. Reborn in death, the Phantom of Terra now prowled the galaxy, no longer bound by the laws of physics or the limitations of its mortal form. Its hull, once silver and shining, was now dark and twisted, wreathed in ghostly flames that seemed to dance along its edges. The souls of its crew, fused with the ship's core, transformed into vengeful spirits, their faces twisted in spectral agony and determination. They were warriors who had given everything for their planet, and now they lived only to avenge it. On the bridge of this unholy vessel stood Captain Elias Cain. In life, he was a hero, a strategist unmatched, whose mind was sharp enough to predict every move of the Terranian forces. But now, in death, he was something far more formidable. His spectral form flickered with energy, his eyes burning with the unyielding rage of a soul that could never rest. Cain had sworn to protect Earth, and even death would not stop him from fulfilling that oath. The Phantom was his weapon, and he wielded it with the fury of a fallen god. Their mission was clear: hunt down every last one of Earth's enemies, no matter where in the galaxy they hid, and bring retribution upon those who had scarred their world. The Phantom of Terra had become more than just a ship. It was a legend, a whispered terror that coiled through the void of space like a curse. Among the scattered remnants of the Thetros coalition, it was known by many names: the Ghost of Retribution, the Spectre of Earth, the Reaper of the Stars. Its presence was a silent promise of death that haunted every corner of the galaxy where the invaders tried to regroup. The Phantom moved with a deadly grace, a predator in the cosmic dark, unseen until the moment it chose to strike, and when it did, its arrival was nothing less than an apocalypse. The tales of the Phantom's vengeance spread like wildfire among the alien ranks, each encounter more horrifying last. Survivors spoke in hushed, trembling voices of a ship that materialized from the darkness, its hull twisted and alive with ghostly flames that seemed to hunger for flesh and metal alike. It was as if the universe itself conspired to hide the Phantom's movements, warping space and light to allow it to drift like a wraith, always one step ahead of those who sought to flee its wrath. It was not just a ship, it was a harbinger, a force of nature that carried with it the very essence of vengeance. Across distant star systems, on forsaken planets and hidden moons, the Thetros attempted to rebuild their scattered forces. They gathered in secret, constructing hidden outposts, marshaling their strength, and plotting a return to dominance. But no matter where they sought refuge, the Phantom of Terra found them. It seemed to know their plans before they were even formed, as if it could read the very thoughts of its enemies. To the Thetros warlords, it was no longer a battle of tactics or technology. It was a war against something far beyond their comprehension. A war against the vengeance of the dead. On a desolate moon in the Azurian sector, shrouded in the shadow of a dying star, a conclave of Thetros warlords had established a fortified outpost. This base, hidden deep within a canyon of ice and rock, was meant to be a sanctuary, a place where they could regroup, strategize, and coordinate their scattered fleets. Shielded by advanced cloaking devices and surrounded by asteroid fields, they believed they were untouchable, far from the reach of any Terranian sensors. The warlords, in their arrogance, assumed they had outsmarted humanity's defenders. They had no idea that they were already marked for death. The Phantom of Terra glided through space, its movement almost imperceptible, like a specter slipping through the cracks of reality itself. The void around it seemed to bend and twist, as though space itself recoiled in fear of its presence. Aboard the vessel, the air was electric with a sense of anticipation. Captain Elias Cain stood on the bridge, his form shimmering with the energy of the otherworldly forces that animated him. His eyes, burning like twin stars of cold fire, were fixed on the distant silhouette of the Thetros outpost. He could feel the pulse of their fear, a faint tremor rippling through the currents of the cosmos, and it brought a cruel smile to his spectral lips. "Bring us closer," Cain commanded, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the ship. The crew, spirits bound to the Phantom by their unending loyalty and the curse of their death, moved as one. They did not speak, they were beyond words now, their thoughts and wills intertwined with the ship's very essence. The Phantom responded like a living creature, its engines humming with a soft, sinister tone as it drifted into the shadow of the Azurian moon, unseen and undetected. As the ship approached, the sky above the outpost began to change. A sickly green fog seeped from the heavens, swirling like the breath of some eldritch beast awakened from its slumber. It spread across the rocky landscape, a luminous mist that seemed to consume the very light of the stars. The Thetros warlords, seasoned in the brutal ways of war, felt a chill crawl down their spines as they watched the fog creep toward them. This was no natural phenomenon. This was the mark of the Phantom, a sign that aimed for them. The outpost's alarms blared to life, their panicked wails cutting through the cold air. Thetros soldiers scrambled into defensive positions, their eyes wide with terror as they trained their weapons on the encroaching fog. Their sensors flashed red with alerts, showing distortions in the atmosphere, spikes in energy signatures, anomalies that defied explanation. Then, out of the emerald haze, the Phantom of Terra appeared. Its hull, once the shining armor of the Arclight, was now a twisted amalgamation of metal and spirit, its surface rippling with spectral flames that seemed to devour the darkness itself. The ship's outline flickered in and out of reality, like a mirage of death suspended between worlds. Its cannons glowed with an unnatural light, charged with the essence of cosmic wrath, each one aimed at the heart of the Thetros stronghold. Captain Cain stood tall at the helm, his gaze piercing through the void, locked onto his prey. His presence was a cold force, the embodiment of vengeance forged in the fires of despair and rage. He reached out with his mind, his spectral voice seeping into the thoughts of every Thetros commander, wrapping around their consciousness like a noose. "You cannot escape," his voice echoed, resonating not just in their ears, but in the deepest recesses of their minds. "You will pay for what you have done to my world." With that utterance, the Phantom unleashed its wrath. From its dark underbelly, spectral drones emerged, shadows given form, born from the souls of fallen Terranian soldiers. These ethereal constructs moved with an unnatural grace, passing through walls and barriers as though they were no more substantial than mist. They infiltrated the outpost, sabotaging power grids, melting through circuits, and disabling weapon systems with a mere touch. Panic erupted among the Thetros forces. They fired wildly into the air, their plasma bolts passing harmlessly through the ghostly forms of the drones. In a final act of defiance, the warlords attempted to activate their failsafes, to blow their own base apart rather than fall to this ghostly foe. But it was already too late. The Phantom's cannons roared, unleashing a barrage of spectral energy that tore through their shields like they were made of paper. The first volley shattered the outpost's defenses, the second obliterated its core. The ground trembled as the base erupted in a cataclysm of fire and light, the shockwave scattering debris into the black void of space. Cain watched the destruction unfold with a grim satisfaction, his expression as cold and unyielding as the ship he commanded. There was no mercy in his eyes, no hint of relief, only the burning rage of a soul that could not rest until every trace of the Thetros coalition had been wiped from existence. This was not the vengeance of a man. It was the vengeance of an entire species channeled through one unrelenting force. As the last fragments of the outpost disintegrated into the night, Cain turned his gaze to the stars. "This is only the beginning," he whispered, more to himself than to his spectral crew. "The galaxy will know our wrath. They will know that the dead do not forgive, and they do not forget." His voice was like a prophecy, echoing through the darkness as the phantom of Terra disappeared into the cosmic sea once more, a nightmare waiting to be reborn in the hearts of those who dared to oppose it. For the Thetros, there would be no safe haven, no distant planet far enough to escape the hunt. The Phantom of Terra was more than a weapon. It was the embodiment of humanity's undying spirit, a relentless tide that would wash across the galaxy, cleansing it of those who had tried to bring Earth to its knees. And as word of its deeds spread from one corner of the cosmos to another, even the bravest of Thetros' warriors began to tremble in the darkness. For they knew the truth. The dead were coming for them, and they carried the fury of a world betrayed. Chapter 3. The Alliance's Last Stand. Fear had become the lifeblood of the galaxy, coursing through the veins of every alien race that had dared to stand against humanity. The shadow of the Phantom of Terra loomed over every star system, every hidden base, and every last hope of survival. The legends of the Ghost Ship spread far and wide. Tales of its spectral vengeance whispered in the darkest corners of the universe. The mere mention of its name was enough to send shivers down the spines of warriors and commoners alike, for they knew that the wrath of Earth's dead could find them no matter where they hid. The surviving leaders of the Thetros coalition had reached the breaking point. They were no longer just Thetros, but an amalgamation of species, old enemies united by a common terror. From the ruthless Drazari warlords to the cunning Vexian technomancers, the High Lords of the Ukthari brood, and even the enigmatic Nidar seers, all gathered under one purpose: to destroy the Phantom before it destroyed them. The ancient rivalries that had once divided these factions were set aside, replaced by a singular urgency to confront a nightmare that transcended even their most fearsome enemies. This unprecedented council took place in the Helios Nebula, a roiling maelstrom of cosmic storms and gravitational anomalies. The nebula was a place where the very fabric of space twisted like a serpent in agony, its luminous gases swirling in hues of violet and crimson, distorted by the pull of unseen forces. Here, the laws of reality itself seemed to falter, making it the perfect place to conceal their desperate meeting. In this warped and forbidden space, where neither light nor truth could penetrate easily, they forged a pact, one that would alter the course of the galaxy itself. They called themselves the Galactic Alliance, a temporary union of their most powerful armadas and elite forces. What was once a fractured multitude of warring species now stood as a united front, bound by their mutual desperation to stop the unrelenting terror that stalked them from the void. The stakes were clear. If they did not succeed in destroying the Phantom, their civilizations would be reduced to nothing more than ruins in the cosmic dust. The Alliance devised a bold and cunning plan, a trap that would exploit the one predictable aspect of the Phantom, its relentless pursuit of vengeance. They would bait the beast by gathering a massive fleet at the Rift of Solara, an anomaly on the edge of known space. The Rift was a tear in the fabric of reality itself, a place where gravitational maelstroms and temporal distortions could bend space-time like molten glass. It was here they would lure the Phantom, drawing it in with the scent of its prey, and then ensnaring it in a dimensional rift strong enough to imprison even the most formidable of warships. The Alliance's fleet was a sight to behold. A gathering of 1,000 vessels from a dozen species, each warship bristling with weapons that could level planets. Massive dreadnoughts, sleek attack frigates, drone swarms, and planetary siege engines formed a wall of steel and plasma at the edge of the rift. This was their ultimate gambit, a confrontation on a scale that had not been seen since the Great War itself. The fleet waited in silent anticipation, the air charged with a sense of impending doom. As the moments stretched into hours, a cold dread began to seep into the hearts of the alien commanders. It was not merely the anticipation of battle. It was the absence of light itself. The stars that once glittered above the battlefield dimmed and then vanished, consumed by an unseen force that seemed to drink the very essence of light. A darkness fell over the fleet, not just the absence of day, but a presence that devoured all warmth, all hope. The space around them seemed to tighten, and the air turned frigid, filled with an unnatural chill that made even the most hardened warriors shiver. Then it came. The Phantom of Terra emerged from the shadows, like a beast crawling out of a cosmic nightmare. No longer did it resemble a mere warship. Its form had transcended into something grotesque and magnificent, a twisted amalgam of metal and soul. Its hull was cloaked in spectral fire, flickering with hues of blue and green, an ethereal blaze that danced like the restless souls bound within it. The ship's structure was warped, bending at impossible angles, as if it were a living wound torn into the fabric of space itself. Along its hull, the faces of its spectral crew could be seen, twisted in agony and resolve, their mouths open in silent screams that echoed through the void. Captain Elias Cain stood at the helm of his unholy vessel, his ghostly visage suffused with an aura of cold fury. His eyes burned brighter than ever, two infernos of vengeance that seemed to pierce the souls of his enemies from across the battlefield. He reached out, his thoughts projecting into the minds of the alien commanders, a voice that was both a whisper and a roar, a chill that gnawed at their sanity. "You thought you could run," Cain snarled, his voice cracking like thunder in their minds. "You thought you could hide. But there is no escaping justice. Not even in the—" But the Phantom of Terra was no mere vessel of steel. It was a revenant, a force animated by the fury of fallen souls. The spectral flames that wreathed its hull absorbed the onslaught like a sponge drinking water, the energy of the attacks dissipating into nothingness. The ship moved through the barrage with a grace that defied all logic, twisting and turning through the storm of fire as if the laws of physics were mere suggestions. Cain commanded the Phantom to strike back, and it did so with a vengeance that eclipsed the fury of dying stars. Its cannons erupted with spectral energy, each shot infused with the wrath of its tormented crew. Blazing torrents of ghostly fire lashed out, cutting through the Alliance's ranks with terrifying precision. Ships were torn apart, their hulls split open like fragile shells, their crews incinerated in bursts of otherworldly light. The wreckage drifted, silent and smoldering, the screams of the dying swallowed by the void. In a desperate bid to survive, the Alliance commanders activated the dimensional rift. A massive tear opened in the fabric of space-time, a swirling vortex of chaos that yawned like the mouth of an ancient beast. The gravity of the rift reached out, pulling at the Phantom, dragging it towards its maw. For a heartbeat, the cosmic horror seemed to falter, its twisted forms struggling against the pull of the anomaly. But then, with a defiant roar that seemed to reverberate across the stars, Captain Cain unleashed the full fury of the Phantom's core, a power that had transcended death itself. The ship's heart flared with a light note of this universe, a searing blaze that seemed to be forged from the raw essence of existence and annihilation. This light surged into the rift, colliding with the anomaly's energies in a cataclysmic explosion. The fabric of space-time buckled, and then, with a shudder that rippled through the galaxy, the rift collapsed in upon itself, consuming not the Phantom, but the entirety of the Alliance's fleet. The battlefield was consumed in a blinding flash, a shockwave of pure energy that obliterated everything in its path. Ships disintegrated into particles, their crews vaporized before they could even scream. The light of the explosion lit up the darkness of space, visible from distant star systems, a cosmic pyre marking the death of the Galactic Alliance. When the energy finally dissipated, all that remained was the Phantom of Terra, drifting silently through the void. It was alone, yet victorious, a solitary harbinger in the wreckage of its enemies. Its spectral flames flickered softly in the darkness, the ghostly faces of its crew gazing out into the endless night with expressions that were both triumphant and mournful. They had claimed their vengeance, but their battle was far from over. The leaders of the Alliance, those few who survived by sheer luck, fled to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Their spirit was broken, their forces shattered. They had tried to cage a nightmare, only to find themselves consumed by it. Now they were scattered like leaves before a storm, each one haunted by the memory of Captain Cain's last words, "There is no escape." The Phantom of Terra, once more alone in the cosmic void, began its silent voyage anew. It was more than a ghost ship. It was the undying wrath of Earth, a force that would never rest, not until every last trace of those who dared to threaten humanity was erased from existence. And thus, the legend of the Phantom grew, becoming a beacon of dread that spread through the galaxy. A chilling reminder that the dead do not sleep, The fallen do not forget, and their vengeance is eternal. The shattering of the Galactic Alliance was more than just a military defeat. It was the collapse of hope itself for those who once sought to bend Earth to their will. The legend of the Phantom of Terra now swept through the galaxy like a plague, a dark fable whispered in 1,000 alien tongues. It became more than a ship. It became the manifestation of Earth's wrath, an unstoppable force that turned the bravest hearts to ash and ground the most powerful empires to dust. Fear spread across distant worlds, seeping into the minds of tyrants and kings who once believed they held dominion over the cosmos. In the aftermath, a transformation took hold among the stars. Those alien empires that had once plotted humanity's demise, dreaming of Earth as nothing more than another conquered world, were now driven to their knees. Across the galaxy, emissaries and diplomats journeyed to the ruins of Terranian outposts, their once proud vessels, now bearing flags of truce and banners of white. They came not as conquerors, but as supplicants, their eyes wide with terror, and their voices trembling as they offered reparations and sworn oaths of eternal non-aggression. The knowledge had taken root in their souls, like a poisoned seed. As long as the Ghost Ship prowled the galaxy, no power could stand against Earth. From the opulent courts of the Ukthari hive mind to the floating citadels of the Vexian dominion, fear and uncertainty rippled like a wave through the galactic hierarchy. Alien monarchs abandoned their thrones, warlords relinquished their battle fleets, and priests of 1,000 faiths called upon their gods for protection. Yet no prayer could save them from the unyielding judgment of the Phantom of Terra. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, as if awaiting the inevitable sentence from a silent, spectral judge. On a distant, desolate world, a forgotten outpost orbiting a dying sun, one of the last surviving Theros warlords stood before a council of his elders. The sky above them was painted in shades of crimson and indigo, 2 moons casting a pale light that seemed to mock their plight. This world had once been a fortress of their might, a rallying point for their forces, but now it was nothing more than a sanctuary for the defeated. The warlord's armor, once gleaming with the insignia of a proud lineage, was now tarnished and cracked, bearing the scars of countless battles lost to the spectral terror that hunted them. The council elders were silent, their faces as ancient and worn as the stone pillars that surrounded them. Their eyes, filled with both resignation and a flicker of defiant pride, rested on the kneeling warlord. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not that of a conqueror, but of a broken man, his will shattered beneath the weight of an enemy he could not defeat. "We cannot fight it," he said, his voice a mere whisper, hollow and drained. "The Ghost Ship? It is more than a weapon. It is a curse, a specter that cannot be stopped, cannot be reasoned with. We have thrown our finest fleets at it, only to watch them torn asunder like leaves in a storm. We must find a way to end this war before it ends us all." But even as he spoke, the sky above them began to change. The light from the twin moons dimmed, swallowed by a creeping darkness that seemed to bleed from the stars themselves. The air grew cold, a stillness falling over the landscape as though the universe itself held its breath in fear. Whispers spread through the gathered crowd, eyes lifting to the heavens with dread. And then, like the embodiment of fate descending from the void, the Phantom of Terra appeared on the horizon. Its form was colossal, towering over the landscape like a deity of vengeance. It no longer looked like a ship, but more like a celestial reaper, cloaked in an aura of ghostly flames that flickered with the hues of agony and fury. The hull was alive with the spectral faces of its crew, their eyes blazing with the light of untamed stars, their mouths open in silent cries of vengeance. The energy that pulsed from its core seemed to warp reality itself, bending the light of the moons, casting twisted shadows that danced across the ground like restless spirits. The warlord's gaze remained fixed on the approaching phantom, his face a mask of despair. His voice cracked as he muttered his final words, his plea lost to the heavens. "It's here. The end has come." On the bridge of the spectral vessel, Captain Elias Cain stood alone, a solitary figure at the helm of his vengeful creation. His once human features were now ethereal, his form flickering with the energy of the countless souls that powered his ship. His eyes, twin orbs of cold fire, seemed to see through both time and space, into the hearts of the doomed below. He no longer needed to command his ship aloud. The Phantom responded to his very thoughts, its consciousness intertwined with his own. "This is the fate you chose," Cain whispered, his voice soft but laced with the power of 1,000 echoes, a chorus of the fallen that had died upon his command. His words seemed to resonate through the universe itself, a final judgment passed upon those who dared defy Earth. In a single, fluid motion, he unleashed the Phantom's full might. The ship's cannons flared, spectral energy surging forth in waves that split the sky apart. The blasts cascaded down upon the Thetros stronghold, engulfing it in a storm of destructive light. The ground trembled, the very air shivered, and the fortress disintegrated into fragments, each piece consumed by the hunger of the ghostly flames. The shockwave radiated outward, shattering stone and metal alike, turning the proud citadel into nothing more than a crater filled with ashes and echoes. Silence fell, deeper than the void of space itself, as the wreckage of the stronghold drifted away like smoke. There was no sound in that moment, only the vision of the fallen structure, now a ruin against the alien sky. Cain's gaze remained fixed on the destruction he had wrought, his face betraying no joy, no sadness, only a cold satisfaction. His fire had not dimmed, it was a blaze that would burn until the last enemy was extinguished. In the days that followed, the Phantom of Terra continued its relentless patrol of the galaxy. From the furthest reaches of uncharted star systems to the familiar constellations of home, its presence became a constant in the night sky. It was a warning, a beacon of humanity's resolve, gliding silently between the stars. Survivors of the war, the scattered remnants of Earth's battered people, looked up in awe and trepidation. They whispered legends of the ghost ship, of its undying captain, and the eternal promise of vengeance that it carried. The Phantom became a guardian in the darkness, its silhouette a silent threat to any who dared entertain thoughts of Earth's subjugation. It was no longer just a weapon, it was the embodiment of Earth's undying spirit, a monument to those who had fallen in the Great War, their souls bound to a mission that would never end. It hunted the enemies of humanity without mercy, tracking them to the most hidden corners of the galaxy, tearing through their defenses as though they were nothing more than dreams shattered by the dawn. As time passed, those who had once feared the Phantom began to see it in a different light. To the enemies of Earth, it remained a specter of doom, but to humanity itself, it became something more. A silent sentinel watching over the cosmos, ensuring that no force could ever again threaten their world. It was the warden of the stars, a constant reminder of the cost of betrayal and the price of defiance. But for Captain Elias Cain and his ghostly crew, there was no rest, no solace in their eternal vigil. Though their names became the stuff of legend, though they had become heroes in the eyes of those who survived, they were still bound by their oath, trapped within the iron cage of the Phantom's twisted hull. They were warriors of vengeance, souls that could never be freed until their duty was fulfilled. Only when the last of Earth's enemies had fallen, only when the galaxy was truly at peace, would the Phantom and its crew find their release. And so the Phantom of Terra sailed on through the endless night, a ship of shadows and fire, a legend etched into the fabric of the universe itself. It was the eternal warden of the stars, a ghost ship that would hunt its enemies to the very end of time, until its crew could finally lay down their burden and rest in the peace they had fought so hard to earn. But until that distant day arrives, when the galaxy's last battle is won, the Phantom's promise remains unbroken. It is the unyielding symbol of Earth's undying spirit, a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness, there will always be a light that refuses to be extinguished, the light of vengeance, the light of justice, the light of a ghost ship that sails forever in the cold, unending night. As the legend of the Phantom of Terra spread like wildfire, its tale reached beyond the known galaxy, carrying on the whispers of dying stars and the echoes of collapsing worlds. It traveled through the cosmic currents to places untouched by time, to the realm of the Celestials, the ancient architects of the universe itself. The Celestials were beings of unimaginable power and knowledge, entities that had witnessed the birth of galaxies and the death of stars, who had crafted the laws of physics and molded the fabric of reality. They were the silent watchers of the cosmos, indifferent to the struggles of mortal life, their existence driven by purposes that transcended the comprehension of lesser beings. For eons, the Celestials had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, their eyes ever fixed on the grand design of the universe. To them, the wars of mortals were as fleeting as the blink of an eye. And even the great war between humanity and the Thetros coalition had seemed like nothing more than a minor disturbance in the cosmic tapestry. But now, something has changed. The emergence of the Phantom of Terra, a vessel that defied the natural order, a ghost ship imbued with the wrath of the dead, was an anomaly that could no longer be ignored. Its presence in the universe was like a dark ripple spreading through the ether, distorting the carefully woven threads of fate. The Celestials convened in their hidden sanctum, a place known as the Chromium Nexus, a dimension of pure thought and energy that lay beyond the boundaries of space and time. Here, the greatest of their kind gathered, their forms shimmering like constellations woven into the very fabric of existence. They spoke in voices that resonated like the hum of stars in their death throes, their language a symphony of cosmic tones that echoed across the galaxies. They debated the anomaly that was the Phantom of Terra, their collective will focusing on a decision that would shape the fate of the universe itself. The Council of the Celestials reached a consensus. They would send forth one of their own to confront the anomaly, to investigate the source of this unrelenting specter that haunted the galaxy. They chose Nixarian, a being of pure energy and ancient wisdom, who had witnessed the birth of the first stars and understood the secrets of the universe's deepest mysteries. Nixarian was not merely a celestial, he was a guardian of the cosmic balance, a force of order in a universe that teetered on the edge of chaos. Nixarian's form shimmered into existence at the edge of the known galaxy, his body cloaked in a robe of starlight that glowed with the radiance of 1,000 suns. His eyes were like black holes, voids of infinite depth that seemed to draw in all light and knowledge. He moved with a grace that defied the laws of physics, each step bending the very fabric of reality to his will. His mission was clear: to understand the nature of the Phantom of Terra and, if necessary, to unbind the curse that held it in its grip. Nixarian began his search among the ruins of the Thetros coalition, tracing the ghost ship's origins through the ashes of defeated worlds and the fractured memories of its victims. He walked through the shattered remains of once proud alien fleets, his gaze passing over the wreckage with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The whispers of dying soldiers and the echoes of lost battles reverberated in his mind, painting a picture of a force that was more than just a vessel. It was a blight upon reality itself. He gathered what he could about Captain Elias Cain and the fallen flagship Arclight, piecing together the tale of how it had become the Phantom of Terra. He discovered that the ship was not merely resurrected by some unknown force, but was transformed by the collective will of its fallen crew, their souls bound together in a singular purpose: to seek vengeance against those who had threatened their world. The Phantom was no longer just a weapon. It was a cosmic anomaly, a wound in the universe that bled with the anger and sorrow of countless spirits. In the cold depths of the Perseus Veil, a region where space twisted into endless spirals of darkness and light, Nixarian finally encountered the Phantom of Terra. The ship loomed before him, its hull flickering with ghostly flames, its form pulsating with an energy that seemed to defy existence itself. The faces of the fallen crew were etched into its metal, their eyes glowing with an unearthly fire that spoke of suffering and determination beyond mortal comprehension. The vessel seemed less like a machine and more like a living entity, a creature forged from rage, bound by sorrow, and driven by a purpose that transcended life and death. Nixarian floated before the ghost ship, his form radiating a light so intense that it pierced through the darkness of the veil. He raised a hand, crackling with cosmic energy, and called out to the ship's master. "Captain Elias Cain," he said, his voice resonating like the echoes of colliding galaxies. "I am Nixarian of the Celestials. I have come to speak with you." A shadowy figure materialized on the Phantom's bridge, growing clearer as it approached the viewport. Captain Elias Cain's spectral form flickered into existence, his eyes burning like twin supernovas, His face was a mask of cold determination, his essence a blend of humanity and the raw, chaotic force that now animated his existence. He gazed at Nixarian without fear, his expression that of a man who had long since surpassed the bounds of mortality. "This vessel is bound by a force greater than you can comprehend," Cain said, his voice like the rumble of distant thunder across an endless void. "We are not merely ghosts, we are the vengeance of the fallen, the last breath of those who sacrificed everything for Earth's salvation. Our purpose is as clear as the day we died. We are the eternal hunters, and our quarry will never escape." Nixarian's eyes narrowed, the void within them deepening as he peered into the soul of the Phantom. He could see the threads of fate that bound Cain and his crew to their grim mission, the sorrow that kept them chained to their path of destruction. "Your rage has upset the balance of the universe," Nixarian warned, his voice layered with both sorrow and stern authority. "Every act of vengeance you commit ripples through the cosmic order, unraveling the threads that hold existence together. If you continue on this path, you will awaken forces that even the Celestials cannot control, forces that lie beyond the light and the dark, beyond the very fabric of time." Captain Cain's gaze remained unwavering, his spectral eyes unblinking and unafraid. "Balance?" he said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Where was your balance when my world was burning, when my people cried out for salvation that never came? Where were the Celestials when the Thetros coalition unleashed hell upon Earth? No, Nixarian, there is no turning back. Not until the last enemy has fallen, not until every scar inflicted upon our world has been avenged." With a surge of defiant energy, the Phantom of Terra unleashed its spectral power, a wave of force that tore through the darkness of the veil like a storm of ethereal fire. The blast collided with Nixarian, pushing him back through the void, his form flickering with ripples of disrupted energy. The Celestial's expression shifted from calm determination to one of reluctant realization. He was not dealing with a mere anomaly. He was facing a force of will as unbreakable as the laws of the universe itself. As Nixarian's light began to fade, he cast one last, long look at the Phantom of Terra, his voice echoing in the emptiness. "Beware the darkness you awaken, Elias Cain," he said, his tone both a warning and a prophecy. "For the deeper you descend into vengeance, the more you draw upon powers that were never meant to be touched by mortal hands. In your quest to hunt the enemies of Earth, you may yet summon a force that even hunters cannot escape." With that, Nixarian dissolved into a shimmer of cosmic energy, vanishing into the darkness of the void. The Phantom remained, drifting silently amidst the stars, a defiant beacon against the backdrop of eternity. Captain Cain stood alone on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the space where Nixarian had disappeared, his mind unyielding, his soul still bound to a promise that even death could not break. For the first time in his spectral existence, Cain felt a shadow of doubt creep into his thoughts, not for himself, but for the path ahead. Yet even as the doubt took root, it was crushed beneath the weight of his purpose. The crew of the Phantom of Terra would continue their eternal hunt, seeking out the enemies of Earth, driven not just by vengeance, but by the oath they had sworn in life and the curse that bound them in death. The universe might tremble at their approach, the very stars might dim at their passing, but the curse that bound them was unbreakable. The Phantom sailed on, undeterred and unbound, hunting its enemies across the cosmic expanse, its journey far from over. And somewhere in the vast depths of the universe, the Celestials watched in silence, knowing that the greatest test of cosmic balance had only just begun. Captain Elias Cain's relentless crusade against Earth's enemies had begun to reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. The Phantom of Terra had become a specter of vengeance, sweeping through the cosmos like a storm, extinguishing those who dared to raise their hands against humanity. The once whispered legend of the Ghost Ship had grown into a terrifying reality that spread fear through every star system, a force that no empire, no fleet, no weapon could withstand. Yet, as the Phantom's shadow lengthened across the galaxy, its unyielding pursuit had unforeseen consequences. Deep within the Andromeda expanse, in the silent ruins of an ancient star system that predated the birth of galaxies, something began to stir. This was a place shunned by even the most ancient races, a graveyard of stars encased in cosmic darkness. There, amid the husks of planets long forgotten, the dread sovereign slumbered. A primordial force bound in chains forged by the hands of the Celestials themselves. The dread sovereign was more than a being. It was a hunger, a cosmic predator that thrived on fear, pain, and death. Eons ago it had roamed the stars, consuming the life essence of entire civilizations, devouring not just bodies but the very souls of the living. The Celestials, in a desperate effort to preserve the balance of the universe, had imprisoned this malevolent entity within a celestial prison forged from dying stars and locked it away in the deepest reaches of the Andromeda expanse. For millennia, the dread sovereign lay dormant, its thirst for destruction sealed behind cosmic barriers that no mortal mind could fathom. But the rise of the Phantom of Terra changed everything. As Captain Cain and his spectral crew tore through the remnants of the Thetros coalition, leaving worlds smoldering in their wake, the energy of their rage and despair reverberated through the void. The Phantom's relentless attacks sent shockwaves through the cosmos, each act of vengeance resonating like a drumbeat to the imprisoned sovereign. The more Cain unleashed his wrath, the more the darkness within the Andromeda expanse responded, quivering with anticipation. The dread sovereign, once thought to be an inert relic of a bygone era, began to awaken, its hunger rekindled by the echoes of death and suffering. From the depths of its prison, the dread sovereign stretched its awareness outward, its tendrils of influence creeping through the cosmic expanse like the roots of a black tree. It sensed the agony of the fallen souls bound to the Phantom of Terra, the fury of Elias Cain, and the twisted vengeance that fueled their every action. With every soul that cried out for retribution, the dread sovereign fed, absorbing the bitterness and despair that seeped from the ghost ship. It began to merge its consciousness with the tortured spirits aboard the Phantom, warping their rage into a force far darker than vengeance. As the Phantom of Terra continued its grim march across the galaxy, Captain Cain noticed something was amiss within his vessel. The once loyal crew, the spectral warriors bound to his cause, began to change. Their faces, once noble and filled with the fire of righteous anger, now twisted into grotesque masks of torment. Their eyes, which once glowed with the light of justice, now burned with an eerie, malevolent hunger. Cain could feel the shift in their souls, a corruption that ran deeper than simple hatred. It was as if their very essence was being consumed by a darkness that had no end. In the quiet corridors of the ship, the whispers grew louder, no longer the voices of his comrades pledging allegiance to Earth. Now they spoke in voices that were wrong, distorted, layered, filled with promises of chaos and destruction that Cain could scarcely comprehend. He heard them in his sleep, felt them in the cold metal beneath his hands as he gripped the controls, and saw them in the flickering shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. The ship itself seemed to pulse with a new, malevolent energy, as if it were becoming a living vessel for the dread sovereign's will. Cain, the voices hissed, echoing through the bowels of the ship, their tone like a chorus of the damned. Join us in the darkness. Embrace hunger. We are no longer bound to the petty laws of the living. Our wrath can devour the stars themselves. Captain Cain's soul trembled as he watched the faces of his crew warp into something unrecognizable. The very warriors who had once died for Earth's survival now seemed eager to forsake their oaths. Their expressions were contorted, their eyes wide and desperate, filled with a thirst for chaos that went beyond mere vengeance. Cain could see the dread sovereign's influence spreading through them, twisting their rage into a burning desire for absolute annihilation. "No," Cain muttered, his voice barely more than a whisper as he fought to maintain control over his ship. "This is not who we are. We swore an oath, to protect, to avenge, not to destroy for destruction's sake." But the darkness within the ship was growing stronger, and the influence of the dread sovereign seeped into every corner of his vessel like a poison. Captain Cain realized that he was losing his grip not only on his crew, but on himself. He could feel the sovereign's cold, insidious voice creeping into his thoughts, urging him to embrace the madness, to become the harbinger of a new cosmic order where life existed only to be consumed. Desperate to reclaim his purpose, Cain reached deep into the fragment of his own humanity that still flickered within him. A piece of his soul, that remembered what it meant to be a man, to fight for justice, not merely vengeance. He stood alone on the bridge, his eyes glowing with a light that struggled against the encroaching darkness. He summoned all his strength, calling out to his crew, the souls who had stood by his side even in death. "Remember who you are," Cain roared, his voice cutting through the malevolent whispers like a blade of pure fire. "Remember why we fight. Not for chaos, not for suffering, but for those we left behind. We are the guardians of Earth, the avengers of the fallen. Do not let this darkness turn us into the very monsters we swore to destroy." For a moment, there was silence, an echoing stillness in which the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. The faces of his crew flickered, their eyes wavering as the light of their original purpose struggled to break through the darkness that consumed them. Cain felt the pull of the Dread Sovereign's influence weaken, its grip on their souls loosening as they remembered their oath. But the Dread Sovereign was not so easily defeated. Sensing Cain's resistance, it unleashed a wave of dark energy, a surge of cosmic force that ripped through the ship, twisting its spectral form. The hull of the Phantom groaned and warped, its ghostly flames turning from blue to a sickly green, as if corrupted by the Sovereign's touch. Cain staggered, feeling the darkness press against his mind like a vice, threatening to crush his resolve. In the heart of this chaos, Cain knew that the battle was no longer just against his enemies. It was against the darkness within himself. The rage that had driven him to the edge of sanity, and the cosmic force that sought to consume everything he had fought for. He could feel the Dread Sovereign's voice echoing in his thoughts, a seductive whisper that promised him power beyond imagination if he would only let go of his humanity. But Cain clenched his fists, his spectral form blazing with defiance. "I am Elias Cain," he roared into the void, his voice shaking the very walls of the Phantom. "I am not your puppet. I will not be your pawn. This ship, this crew. We fight for Earth, for the fallen, for the light that refuses to be extinguished." With a surge of sheer will, Cain channeled the energy of his rage and defiance into the core of the Phantom, forcing the malevolent influence of the Dread Sovereign back. The ghostly flames of the ship flared bright blue once more, purging the sickly corruption that had begun to spread. His crew, their souls restored to their original purpose, rallied to his side, their eyes clear and fierce with the determination to fulfill their oath. Yet even as they reclaimed control of the Phantom, the threat of the Dread Sovereign was far from vanquished. From its ancient prison in the Andromeda expanse, the entity seethed, its hunger growing ever stronger. It had tasted the rage of Elias Cain and the despair of his crew, and now it knew that the universe was ripe for its return. The cosmic chains that had bound it for eons were weakening, and soon, the Dread Sovereign would break free. And as Captain Cain stood on the bridge of his reborn vessel, he understood one harrowing truth. The true battle was yet to come. The awakening of the Dread Sovereign had only just begun, and its insatiable hunger for life energy threatened not just the enemies of Earth, but the entire cosmos itself. The Phantom of Terra would not just be a hunter of traitors and invaders. It would become the first line of defense against a force that could devour the stars, a force that even the Celestials themselves had failed to contain. Cain and his spectral crew had faced death and come back stronger, but now they faced something worse than death. They faced the darkness that lurked in the heart of all creation. And in that darkness, the Dread Sovereign waited, its malevolent eyes fixed on the Phantom, its whisper echoing through the void. "You are mine, Elias Cain. You have awakened me, and now I will awaken the universe to fear once more." The Phantom of Terra sailed on, its crew more resolute than ever, but the shadow of the Dread Sovereign loomed larger than ever before, a cosmic menace that threatened to consume not just their enemies but all existence. The Phantom of Terra drifted through the void, its spectral flames flickering with an uneasy light, as though even the ship itself could sense the darkness consuming its crew. Captain Elias Cain stood on the bridge, his face etched with grim determination. The corruption of the Dread Sovereign was no longer just a threat to his mission of vengeance. It was a direct assault on the souls of his fallen comrades, the very essence of what bound them to their cause. He knew that if he did not act swiftly, The crew that had fought and died for Earth would become slaves to a power that sought to devour the galaxy. Cain's resolve crystallized into a singular, desperate plan. He set a course for the necropolis of Eos, an ancient, forbidden world that existed on the fringes of both legend and reality. It was a planet shrouded in myth, a place whispered about in the darkest tales of the galaxy. The necropolis was rumored to be a gateway between life and death, where the Celestials once banished entities too powerful to be destroyed, sealing them away in eternal confinement. If there was any hope of severing his crew's souls from the dread sovereign's grasp, it lay within the haunted heart of that world. As the Phantom of Terra approached the necropolis, its spectral hull seemed to resonate with the energies emanating from the cursed planet below. The world itself was a sight to behold, suspended in the void like a jewel of despair. Its surface was a wasteland of jagged obsidian spires and colossal statues, each carved in the likeness of forgotten gods and celestial beings, long since abandoned by the universe. The landscape was veiled in a mist that shimmered with ghostly light, the air thick with the echo of countless souls that had been trapped there for eons. The planet's atmosphere was heavy with an aura of grief and unresolved sorrow. Wraiths and spirits, twisted remnants of beings who had been banished there long ago, drifted aimlessly across the necropolis. Their forms flickered in and out of existence, their spectral faces frozen in expressions of torment, their voices wailing in lament for the lives they had once known. Their cries merged with the mournful hum of the phantom itself, creating a symphony of despair that seemed to echo through the very bones of the universe. Cain's spectral crew, who had once been disciplined warriors of the fallen Arclight, now moved like shadows behind him, their features distorted by the malevolent influence of the dread sovereign. Their eyes, once bright with the fire of vengeance, now glowed with a hunger that was alien to them, a dark thirst for chaos and destruction that threatened to consume their very essence. Cain could see the struggle within them, the flicker of humanity that still clung to their souls, fighting against the corruption that gnawed at their spirit. Determined to reclaim his crew, Cain led a small detachment through the twisting pathways of the necropolis, past towering crypts that loomed like guardians of the dead. They reached the Altar of Eternal Dawn, an ancient structure carved into the bedrock of the planet itself. The altar was a massive stone edifice, adorned with intricate glyphs and symbols of celestial power that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. This was the place where the boundary between life and death was at its thinnest, where the whispers of the dead could be heard as clearly as the breath of the living. Cain approached the altar with a sense of both awe and dread, his spectral form crackling with the energy of the phantom. He reached out with a trembling hand and placed it upon the cold surface of the stone. As his fingers touched the ancient glyphs, the runes carved into the altar flared to life, releasing a pulse of energy that surged outward, enveloping his crew in a wave of ethereal light. For a brief, transcendent moment, the air around them seemed to shimmer, and the wraith-like forms of Cain's crew began to change. Their twisted visages softened, their eyes losing the malevolent glow that had taken hold. Cain could see the flicker of recognition, the glimmers of the warriors they once were, their faces etched with the noble purpose that had driven them to fight for Earth, not for destruction but for love, for hope, for a world that could be safe once more. But as that pulse of light reached its zenith, a sudden darkness swept over the necropolis like a suffocating fog. The ground beneath the altar trembled, and from the depths of the planet, a voice boomed, a voice that seemed to resonate from every corner of the cosmos, deep and malevolent, filled with a mockery that chilled Cain's soul. "You think you can break my chains?" The voice of the dread sovereign taunted, its tone dripping with a dark amusement that echoed across the vast necropolis. "I am not merely your enemy, Elias Cain. I am the embodiment of your rage, the shadow of your despair. Every act of vengeance you unleashed upon this galaxy has fed my hunger. You forged me in the crucible of your hatred. You cannot destroy what you have created." A shockwave of darkness erupted from the altar, throwing Cain and his crew to the ground. The wraith-like figures of his comrades twisted in agony, their forms warping under the influence of the sovereign's malevolent power. their faces once again contorted into masks of torment, their eyes now filled with a ravenous hunger, not just for vengeance, but for annihilation itself. Cain struggled to his feet, his own form flickering as he fought to hold on to his sense of self. He knew now that the dread sovereign was not merely feeding off his crew's despair. It was binding itself to his very soul, using his own rage as a conduit to break free from its cosmic prison. The realization struck him like a blade to the heart. The longer he allowed his hatred to guide him, the stronger the dread sovereign would become. In that moment of darkest despair, Cain reached deep within himself, searching for the fragment of his humanity that had not yet been consumed by the abyss. He remembered Earth as it once was. The laughter of children in sunlit fields, the glow of city lights under the night sky, the faces of those he had sworn to protect. He remembered the love he had for his people, a love that had driven him to defy death itself. And in that memory, he found the strength to confront the darkness within. "No more," Cain whispered, his voice low but filled with a defiant clarity that cut through the sovereign's taunts. "I will not let my rage be your weapon. I will not let my crew be your puppets." He turned his gaze back to the altar, his spectral form blazing with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the darkness. With all the power of the phantom at his command, he channeled its energy directly into the heart of the altar, forcing the runes to flare with a light that rivaled the birth of stars. The energy pulsed through his body like fire, burning away the tendrils of corruption that had bound his soul to the dread sovereign. As the light from the altar intensified, the phantom of Terra itself seemed to roar with defiance. The ship's ghostly flames turned from their sickly green hue back to a brilliant, vibrant blue, the color of justice, of hope reborn. Cain's crew, their forms still flickering with the remnants of darkness, felt the pulse of that light surge through them, banishing the malevolent hunger that had twisted their souls. But the act was not without cost. Cain could feel the energy tearing through his own essence, threatening to consume him entirely. The light that he poured into the altar was not just the power of the phantom, it was the raw force of his own soul, the sacrifice of his very being to save his crew from eternal damnation. The spectral forms of his comrades stabilized, their eyes clear and resolute once more, the flames of vengeance replaced by a noble purpose, the true purpose for which they had died. "You cannot hold me forever, Cain," the dread sovereign's voice howled, now filled with a fury that shook the bones of the necropolis itself. "Your light is a mere flicker against the vast darkness I command. When you falter, when your resolve shatters, I will consume you, your crew, and every soul that dares to defy me." Cain, his form dimming as he expended the last of his energy into the altar, looked up at the sky of the necropolis, where distant stars seemed to shine just a little brighter. "I may fall," he whispered, his voice filled with the unwavering strength of a man who had faced death 1,000 times. "But we will rise again, not as vengeful ghosts, but as the guardians of all that we hold dear." With that final declaration, the light from the altar reached its peak, and a shockwave of energy exploded outward, severing the dread sovereign's hold on the crew of the Phantom. The darkness recoiled, shrieking as it was cast back into the abyss from which it had come. Its tendrils snapped and its influence shattered. The necropolis of Eos fell silent, and in that stillness, the spectral crew of the Phantom stood once more at their captain's side, not as twisted revenants, but as the warriors they had always been. They looked to Cain, their eyes filled with gratitude and the renewed fire of their mission. And as the Phantom of Terra lifted off from the cursed world, its hull blazing with the defiant blue flames of justice, Cain knew that the battle was far from over. They had won a reprieve, but the dread sovereign still lurked in the depths of the cosmos, waiting for the moment to strike again. But now, the crew of the Phantom was united, their purpose pure. They were not just a force of vengeance anymore. They were a beacon of hope against the darkness that threatened to consume the galaxy. And as they sailed into the infinite night, their spirits were unbroken, their oath unyielding, their light undimmed. The necropolis of Eos fell silent, and in that stillness, the spectral crew of the Phantom stood once more at their captain's side, not as twisted revenants, but as the warriors they had always been. They looked to Cain, their eyes filled with gratitude and the renewed fire of their mission. And as the Phantom of Terra lifted off from the cursed world, its hull blazing with the defiant blue flames of justice, Cain knew that the battle was far from over. They had won a reprieve, but the dread sovereign still lurked in the depths of the cosmos, waiting for the moment to strike again. But now, the crew of the Phantom was united, their purpose pure. They were not just a force of vengeance anymore. They were a beacon of hope against the darkness that threatened to consume the galaxy. And as they sailed into the infinite night, their spirits were unbroken, their oath unyielding, their light undimmed. The Phantom of Terra hovered above the necropolis of Eos, its spectral form blazing with a light that seemed to pierce through the deepest shadows of the ancient world. The twisted hull that once radiated with ghostly flames began to ripple, as if reacting to some unseen force. Captain Elias Cain stood at the heart of the ship's bridge, his eyes locked onto the altar, where he had faced down the power of the dread sovereign. The battle for the souls of his crew was over, but the war for the fate of the galaxy had just begun. Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from the altar, sending shockwaves rippling through the necropolis. The Phantom began to transform, its dark and twisted form shifting in a blinding burst of radiance. The ship's ghostly flames, once flickering with malevolent hues of green and violet, exploded into a brilliant cascade of light, a spectrum of pure energy that washed over the entire landscape. Its hull straightened, becoming sleeker, more streamlined, yet more majestic and imposing than ever before. It was no longer the terrifying wraith that haunted its enemies, but a celestial being of justice, reborn. Its transformation was not just physical. It was a declaration, a cosmic metamorphosis that marked the turning of its purpose from vengeance to guardianship. As the ship changed, the souls of Cain's crew were drawn into the air around him, rising like a constellation of stars igniting one by one. Their spectral forms glowed with an ethereal light, pure and untainted by the corruption that once twisted them. Their faces, no longer marred by torment or rage, now held expressions of peace, their eyes clear and bright with a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time since their tragic deaths, they were free from the chains of hatred that had bound them. "Captain Cain," whispered a voice among the crew, their collective tone filled with wonder. "We are whole again." Cain felt the surge of their unified spirit flow through him, a wave of power that was not born of wrath but of something far more profound, hope, tempered with the fire of resolve. He stood at the center of this transformation, his once flickering spectral form solidifying into a figure that seemed almost alive. His eyes, now radiant orbs of light, held a clarity that seemed to reach across the universe itself. But even as this miracle unfolded, a roar of defiant rage tore through the heavens. The dread sovereign, bound by the forces of the altar of eternal dawn, shrieked with a fury that shook the very foundation of the necropolis. Its voice, a monstrous amalgamation of rage and despair, echoed like the wail of dying galaxies. "This is not over," the dread sovereign howled, its energy crackling against the chains that now bound it to the ancient altar. "You think this light can destroy me? I am the darkness within every soul, the hunger that never dies. As long as vengeance burns in the hearts of the living, I will return." Cain stepped forward, his gaze unwavering, his voice like the calm roll of distant thunder that could be heard even beyond the veil of reality itself. "You are right," he said, his tone carrying not anger but a sorrowful wisdom that transcended his spectral existence. "Vengeance is a fire that consumes everything in its path. It devours the innocent and the guilty alike. But you have forgotten one thing, Sovereign. It is not vengeance that truly fuels us. It is justice." With a deliberate, measured motion, Cain raised his hand, and the reborn vessel that had once been the Phantom of Terra responded. The ship's core glowed with an intensity that dwarfed the light of stars, its energy spiraling outward in brilliant arcs. It was as if the essence of the galaxy itself had been harnessed within its structure, waiting to be unleashed. Cain's crew, now free from the chains of vengeance, joined their power to his, their spirits merging into a single, harmonious force. The ship began to ascend from the ruins of the necropolis, and with a final act of defiance, Captain Cain released the full might of its transformed energy directly into the altar. A column of light burst from the ship's heart, striking the altar with the force of a supernova. The energy spread across the necropolis in radiant waves, binding the dread sovereign back into its cosmic prison, sealing the entity within layers of celestial chains forged from the very light it despised. The dread sovereign writhed within its prison, its form splintering as the ancient glyphs etched into the altar glowed with renewed power. Its voice, now filled with a desperate venom, reached out one last time, clawing at Cain's mind. "You cannot contain me forever, Elias Cain," it snarled. "I am the rage of the universe, the shadow that will always rise when light falters. You have only delayed the inevitable." Cain stood firm, his gaze unwavering as he looked upon the entity's torment. "You are bound by your own hunger," he replied, his voice filled with a quiet strength. "But I am bound by something stronger, the love of those I protect, the hope that burns brighter than any star. You are right that vengeance alone cannot bring peace, but as long as there's even one soul that believes in justice, you will remain powerless." With those words, the transformation of the ship reached its culmination. The vessel that had once been the Phantom was now reborn as the Spirit of Terra, its sleek, radiant form a symbol of a new mission. It was no longer a harbinger of vengeance that struck fear into the hearts of Earth's enemies. It had become a guardian of the galaxy, a beacon of hope and protector of the cosmic order. Its spectral hull gleamed with the light of 1,000 suns, its energy a blend of Earth's undying spirit and the eternal balance that governed the universe. The souls of Cain's crew, no longer driven by hatred, now radiated with a serene purpose. They were transformed into celestial sentinels, their forms intertwined with the fabric of the Spirit of Terra itself, each one a star that guided the ship on its noble quest. No longer bound to their past rage, they were driven by a new oath: to protect life, to honor the sacrifices of the fallen, and to preserve the fragile peace they had fought so hard to secure. As the Spirit of Terra ascended from the dark world of Eos, its light cast a beacon across the galaxy, a warning and a promise to all who would dare to disturb the peace. The dread sovereign's roar faded into silence, its defiant cries swallowed by the celestial prison that held it fast. Yet Cain knew, even as the necropolis fell quiet, that the threat was never truly gone. The galaxy watched in awe as the Spirit of Terra moved through the starlit void, a ship reborn in the fires of redemption. It sailed past dying stars and through cosmic storms, its mission now transformed. No longer just a vessel of retribution, it had become a force of cosmic equilibrium, dedicated to guarding the fragile line between chaos and order. As they sailed through the infinite night, Captain Cain stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon of the galaxy. He could see the future unfolding before him, not as a series of battles to be won, but as a journey toward a greater purpose. He turned his eyes back toward the necropolis of Eos, now a silent tomb that held the universe's darkest secret, where the dread sovereign lay imprisoned once more. "True peace may never come easily," Cain murmured, his voice barely audible but filled with the conviction of a soul that had seen the depths of despair and come through the other side. "But as long as we sail the stars, there will always be hope. We are the light that stands against the darkness, the guardians of the fallen, the shield that protects the innocent." His crew, now celestial warriors bound by light, echoed his vow, their voices a harmonious chorus that resonated with the stars. "We are the Spirit of Terra," they chanted in unison, "and we will stand vigilant until the stars themselves fade from the sky." And so the Spirit of Terra continued its journey through the cosmos, its light unyielding and its purpose clear. Captain Cain and his crew had transcended the bonds of vengeance to become something greater, a force of cosmic justice that would watch over the galaxy, ensuring that the balance between light and darkness was maintained. The final judgment had been rendered, but the battle against the forces that sought to consume the universe was far from over. As long as there were hearts that burned with hatred, as long as there were whispers of vengeance in the darkness, the Spirit of Terra would remain, a sentinel against the tide of chaos, and in the quiet depths of the necropolis, the dread sovereign waited with the promise of its inevitable return. "I will rise again, Elias Cain," it whispered into the void, unseen but not unheard. "And when I do, your light will be the first to fall. But for now, the galaxy was safe, held within the embrace of the spirit of Terania, the eternal guardian that would never rest, never falter, and never forget the sacrifices made in the name of peace. If you like this story, please press the like button and subscribe. It encourages me to write more stories. Thank you.